No pressure on me now, I guess. Thank you. First of all, thank you for coming in. I was kind of hoping there'll be one or two people as I embarrass myself on the stage, but it seems like a full room, so I would appreciate the sanctity of not making a fool of myself, I guess. For people who don't know who I am, I've been in the cybersecurity space for a little over, I'll say 13 years. Primarily, that was in Australia. I moved over to the UK 7 months ago, and for the last 7 years, I've been working in cloud security. The last role was as a CISO before I left that to become a full-time podcaster, YouTuber now. So I run something called Cloud Security Podcast. I think about a few familiar faces, so they know what we talk about. Basically, as the name suggests, primarily talking about cloud security. So the conversation that we're having today is part of, so we run cloud security training, and as part of that, let's just say, how do I describe this without embarrassing my team or myself? So we were running a cloud security training, and as part of that, one of the trainers left the GitHub access key. Well, I wouldn't say it was fully just left in GitHub. It was kind of just left there. Someone who was a researcher in the class decided to just give us a video of what that would look like if they could have just gone full explored mode on that. They did not. So this is kind of a talk about what it is. Even if you feel you're doing everything from a cloud security perspective, how there are always these little holes that are left behind as well. So hopefully this is valuable for everyone who's coming in. And for me to get a sense of the crowd, is anyone an AWS person, Azure person? AWS? Ooh, sweet. Azure? Cool. So, okay, very few. GCP? Is anyone using any other cloud or? No, the clouds. I was kind of hoping there'll be one hand Oracle Cloud somewhere, but thankfully there wasn't. So outside of this, as you can imagine, I enjoy men's fashion and coffee, so that's kind of my thing. Sweet. So the story, the person was quite kind enough to give me a video. Now, I did try recreating this on the actual AWS console, but for people in the Amazon space, it was reInvent, and they advanced the Amazon queue. The console looks very different, so I'm going to show you the video instead of taking you to the console. So please bear with me as I just give you the video itself. By the way, we made the video online on YouTube as well, so if you want to go there. Can you guys hear? I don't want to, there you go, perfect. So essentially, this is the file, which is a Terraform. Is that going to be visible? It won't be visible. I'm going to try and maximize, so hopefully people can see it, but is that still visible for people in the end? Perfect. Has anyone used Terraform before? Anyone? Perfect. This is going to hit home for you guys. So, this is a Terraform state file. For people who have not used Terraform state file or Terraform in general, it's an infrastructure as code language, free, open source. HashiCorp, doing an awesome job with it. I'm not going into the drama of what happened after now, but essentially we have been using it to build infrastructure and bring down infrastructure every time you run training. As part of that, for people who have tried integrating Terraform into AWS, it requires you to have an IAM user. For people in the Azure space, IAM user is like a local user inside your AWS account, which is separate to your AD account. So hopefully that kind of levels the playing field. It's as much as a user, which is an Active Directory user in the AWS context. Now, Terraform obviously could go down the path of doing some kind of a external role if you were to go down the path of Terraform Cloud, but most people primarily use the IAC language. They have a GitHub repository that they use to build infrastructure in. So this particular, I guess the video that was shared starts off by showing we had a username and password in that state file that was pushed into the GitHub repository. That's what's highlighted. Kind of embarrassing password, but anyways, password 123 is not the best password, one would say, to kick it off things. But essentially, that was a Terraform state file, an endpoint, and a username. Now, on the onset, the person didn't really know what that was. They tried username and password on Terraform Cloud, didn't really work. But I think the interesting part was later, as it kind of progresses, they thought that was the access key for AWS, which it wasn't, fortunately. It was an API key that we were using. And they kind of decided, okay, this is clearly something important over here. Now, endpoint that's mentioned over here, the 892.960 something, essentially what I'm trying to say over there is the fact that for people who use AWS accounts, there are a couple of ways you can, I guess, use the CLI. One is you have an access key, you can get a IAM user created from the access key, a long-term one. Or the other way around is if you get access to the IAM account itself, you can just log in if you have the account ID. So this person chose to log in into that account, and that's basically what they did after. I kind of realized the region was Stockholm, because my region normally is either Sydney or Northeast, but I'm not going to make an assumption over there. But essentially, at this point in time, I'm super proud of our team. They're going, oh, everything seems to be red, which is a good sign that we're doing security right. So that even though the person's moving around, yeah, MFA was not there. That's okay. Like at least the person logged in, but everything else seems to be pretty much down to the pat where I felt a bit comfortable. Like as I was watching this video, I felt, yep, this is all good. Nothing to be worried about. A lot of reds over here as well. There's a good permission boundary. And as we kind of kept going through this video, the person comes across this Terraform user also has an access key. I don't know why we created an access key for it, but we did. And I think later on I found out, and Terraform people can confirm this, you still need an access key as well on top of it for doing CLI actions, apparently. So it's not just enough to have an IAM user, but you also need access keys. Now, I don't know if this is still a thing. This, by the way, happened, I would say, last quarter. So Q3 is when this happened. So this is fairly recent. So I don't imagine Terraform has changed a lot. But we were still very confident as we were watching this video. We're going, okay, I've got read-only, EC2 read-only. For context, I guess for people who probably have often an Azure or GCP, that's what an IAM or an identity access management screen looks like for AWS. And a IAM user essentially, it depends on what you have as a role assigned to you that you can do what you want to. That's why most people go for read-only. Now, not all read-only permissions have only read-only permission. There's write permissions to it as well, as you would see in the next few minutes of it as well. The individual tried launching an instance, which is a virtual machine for Azure. Usually when we have seen a pattern where if you talk to anyone who's had an incident in AWS, going through an instance creation path is probably risky because you instantly sometimes get an alert for, hey, there's an instance type which was not approved has been created, or if there's no guardrail for it, or someone picks it up easily. So usually it's not recommended, but the person chose to go down that path just to see if they had the permission. My assumption is to do cryptojacking would have been the initial thinking here. But I think I'll let the person continue over it a bit more. This was the embarrassing piece. This is CloudTrail. For people who don't know CloudTrail, CloudTrail is the auditing service in AWS. Essentially, everything that happens in AWS is recorded by this service called CloudTrail. So everything from me logging in with my IAM user or my single sign-on user, all the way to resetting my password and creating instances and everything else. That was kind of like what CloudTrail does. And as the person progresses, for people who probably know CloudTrail, you'll realize this already, that we didn't have CloudTrail turned on. Now, what's the importance of this turned on? Essentially, whenever you do an instant response for a breach in AWS, this is the first thing you go for. You look for, either what has the person been up to in CloudTrail so I can find out, I can backtrack to what the person has been doing. Or the other way you do is, as a lot of people do, so if you want to go loud, is you just delete the CloudTrail to begin with. That's the two-way people already approach if you get access to an AWS account. Now, conveniently, I made it easy. I didn't even turn it on, so it didn't have to do anything else. So it was a much more easier exercise for the individual. But essentially, if you are looking at this in your organization, if you're ever trying to do a kill chain analysis, a lot of the time, incident response teams and forensic teams are looking for, hey, where are your CloudTrail logs? Do you have an identity? Now, there's a bit more complexity to what gets logged and how long it takes and all of that as well. But essentially, a lot of good practice is to have your CloudTrail exported out of AWS. I'm going to let the video continue. Yep, so that confirmed that I actually don't even have a CloudTrail account. So I didn't have basically any way. Even if they did something, I would not even know what they did if they were to do something and walk away. So that was the first thing they found, which is still not bad, right? I think at this point in time, I'm still going, okay, this person is not going to do much because read-only permissions, don't want to launch instance, but they found an instance running in the North Virginia region. which is what I said in the beginning, that we primarily operate in the Northern Virginia region and Sydney region, for reasons being any new service that comes in from AWS, 90% of the time that service is available in North Virginia region, which is why you end up using that. And we had a service which was left running. I'm still confident at this point, by the way. Like, the person only has read-only permission, cannot do much. Session manager usage, nothing happens, or it does. So I must confess at this point, and I did not realize that AWS has changed their console to the point that I don't need to be on a command prompt anymore to log in into a box. I could just do it from a console. That's what SSM and the system manager does. But the person didn't do anything there either. They found the role that was attached to the EC2 instance had an SSM management instance role. And there was an additional, so I guess you can see where this is going with this now. Essentially, there was a role attached to the EC2 instance, which was not a bad role, the SSM management instance role, but then someone added an additional role, which is not from my Terraform, which had permission to S3 allow, which basically means that I have access to all the S3 buckets in the entire account that I have. That's kind of where it starts worrying me a bit. But anyway, I think it's too late at that point in time anyway, so we're like, okay, this is going to be how they're going to operate. So they go back to the SSM session. The S3 LS is basically to show, it should be visible. It's visible. Yeah, that was basically to show that they can list all the, so I used to have CloudTrail turned on, but I just decided to somehow not keep it on. And the next thing they ended up doing was to search for, once it comes up, there was a ransomware bucket that was created. That was basically totally an experimental bucket. Essentially, for people who don't know, ransomware has been quite popular for a while. And the way ransomware works in Amazon is that instead of what happens in what you hear in the news, where you're locked out of your system, what people do in the AWS context is basically, if they have access to your AWS account, they would copy everything out of your S3 bucket and just leave a note with their Bitcoin address in there as well. That's kind of how ransomware works in a cloud context. So this bucket over here was to show that experiment where, hey, you could just have a lot of information in your S3 bucket, which delete and, but then again, CloudTrail has to be turned on to know that someone's done that. There's a whole background to it, but that particular bucket was intentionally kept as a experimental bucket. And as they kind of get through that, I think that was towards the tail end of it as well. Yep, so they couldn't download anything, which was a good thing. So they're like, okay, so they can access the bucket, but they could not change anything. But there was something interesting that they did over here that I'm just gonna come up in a second. If this person moves a bit more forward. Oh yeah. So apparently you could just do, this is a silent test without triggering any alarms. When you do a -- dry run, normally people have alerts for if someone scans an entire S3 bucket, there's an alarm that's set for, hey, by the way, someone's scanning all your S3 buckets. But dry run is technically not logged in CloudTrail. At least the way I saw it, it's, you can see that, hey, I ran a command, quote unquote, for S3 bucket. Now, this may change as things more change. But essentially what we realized was this was not being logged into our SIEM solution because it's technically just testing the fact that, hey, can I do this? And that's pretty much it. It doesn't do anything else apart from, it doesn't copy the file. It just basically tests the fact that whether the person can download the file or not as well. So make sure it comes. Yep. So basically that's what the person ends up doing now. I think after that, the person just basically created a folder, copied across what was there to copy. That's essentially the end of the video as well. Essentially, but one would think they would stop for that particular perspective, but then they come back, no public IP. They can copy the S3 bucket if they want to, but they're choosing not to. And they went for, once it comes up, geez. It's so much quicker when it's happening in real time, but it's just like, what is the person going to do? They didn't want to attach a public IP address. Come on. Oh, yeah. So for people who don't know about volume and snapshot, essentially every server that you have in your AWS has an EBS volume. Technically, it's just a volume. A very well-known strategy, if you ever get access to an AWS account, is that you don't want to, if there is an agent in that volume, how do you get information without being detected by the agent? You make a snapshot of it, and then you access the snapshot. You don't access the volume itself. So that's pretty much what that was towards the end. When I close that, come back to my slide, and start embarrassing myself even more. But essentially, what you saw over there were three things that happened. First of all, we had the Terraform state file with the Terraform IAM user, which is kind of like, I think if you think about where it kind of came from, totally own it. When we detected it, we had to delete the entire repository because it's not easy deleting from GitHub history. I don't know, has anyone ever tried deleting something from GitHub history? Oh, someone has. All right, a couple of people. So that's how rare this is. In a room of almost, 30, 40 plus people, 2 people have tried it. I was probably one of them. I failed. All the Stack Overflow articles don't work. At least the ones I tried did not work. So at that point in time, we decided to just kill the entire repository and move on with our lives. And we recreated the thing because there's nothing else you can do. So for basically, we didn't have, if the person did not inform us, we probably would have kept it there as well. So we're definitely grateful, and they wanted us to show it. And obviously, that's what we've been doing over the past few months or so, just sharing with people. Hey, that even if you have a read-only permission, and you've been doing it for 7 years apparently, you still have gaps that are left behind by changes you may have been going, and the changes are frequent enough that you can miss sometimes what the changes have been left for people, even if you're using Terraform. So the first thing they did was identified I was not using CloudTrail. As someone who's basically getting access to an AWS account, the first thing I normally do is either I would just turn it off, or I would basically make sure if there's a CloudTrail turning on, I would create a separate user, which is named similar to an existing IAM user, and then use that to do what I'm doing. Because then it gets logged into that. And usually when people are going through logs, they see a similar name. If it's just Ashish, and I just say make it to Ash or whatever, but have like an extra E or extra N in the end, people don't really notice it. So you can go through and spend a lot of time in there if you want. The other thing that the individual did was they tried finding out if they had access to S3 bucket, which in this particular scenario, because of the IAM role on the EC2 instance they found, they were able to get to the S3 bucket, which they could have copied, but they could not pull it out of the, if you notice, the reason why the person was looking for the Elastic IP was because it wasn't accessible from the internet. So they couldn't take the data out from the internet. They could basically do whatever they want inside, which is what you would notice most infrastructure designed in a way that you can come inside, but how do you leave? That's kind of where I think most strategies kind of play the role of, if they're inside the environment, if they are inside an EC2 or inside a server, our endpoint security would pick it up. But if they are, say, in a network, we will have network controls that they can't go leave the system as well. So we had the basic controls, but then the other point which we did was the volume. You can make a snapshot of it. You can still access what's in there. You can create your own EC2 instance and without the agent if you want to, and add an external ID or external account ID there. Basically, this was not a thing until like a few years ago, where it wasn't easy for you to share volumes between different accounts and different regions. But as AWS has expanded, these days you can share volumes and snapshots across multiple accounts as well, because everyone these days, no one really has a one account AWS structure as well these days. Everyone has multiple accounts. So that was the demo, but essentially for people who are still kind of thinking what the fuck happened, hopefully I could swear, but anyways, too late. We had the Terraform access key, as I said. Now, in terms of an organization that may be working on Amazon instances and trying to see what they look like, usually from a risk perspective, what you're looking at is that obvious one is reputation damage, but there's always some low-hanging fruit that's always remains behind. I think that's kind of what the messaging for us from all this was. Even though we thought we had everything, we had a CSPM as well to make things easier, but essentially just a common mistake of having a IAM role. this is a business logic flaw. This is not a vulnerability. And most of your tooling does not pick up on a quote-unquote business logic flaw. This is where people do pen testing and all of that comes in. The idea behind this was if there are low-hanging fruits, if the change is made to the system, we should have been able to pick it up. That's at least was the reason why we thought this is something worthwhile sharing as well. But this is what the structure looked like. And for people who probably have never seen Terraform before, essentially, that's what the manifest file is. This is, assume that's me with a shorter beard. That's basically, I would do a Terraform plan, Terraform apply, and the manifest file is what tells the environment that, hey, this is what I need to create, these many servers, these many volumes, or whatever. And the solution, instead of going for a state file, which is stored in your local repository in GitHub, the recommendation usually is to use Terraform Cloud. Now, Terraform Cloud is something which has a free tier as well. You don't have to pay for it, even though there's a whole enterprise tier to it. I did not know there was a free tier. I just assumed there was a paid SaaS service. And you can use your state file to be stored in the Terraform Cloud instead of your local repository. So at least you give away that risk to someone else at that point in time. So this is my one thing that we learned from this incident, that we stopped using Terraform locally. We just started using Terraform Cloud and moved across our state files over to Terraform Cloud at that point in time, which still allows us the same flexibility. You can still run it from your laptop. You can still do pretty much what you could do before as well. Obviously, as I'm pointing out, this is a file that was in my laptop. Now that's been moved over to the Terraform Cloud environment now. I do want to call it out. For some reason, I think when I gave this talk a couple of months ago at DTX Europe, this is not, by the way, my employer. I think just to make sure, because the last company that I was working for, they did not have this. I know it was fairly recent that they had a breach as well, but this is not that particular breach. Just calling it out up front before someone does ask me and knows about it, but leaving that out there for you folks. Right. Now, the tale of three cloud breaches. I kind of explained what happened, but what was truly the tale of three cloud breaches? As we were going through this exercise, we were kind of trying to see why is it that it's not a common knowledge to kind of share this information about business logic flaws in applications. All of us have seen it in on-premise environments all the while. Usually, we used to do what's called a pen test. That used to be an obvious solution for us to find out, hey, is there a business logic flaw that I'm missing out on? But what seems to be happening, and I'm guilty of this as well, as a pen test in cloud, people normally go, I just want to do the application. I don't want to do the network layer because I've got a CSPM or I've got another network tool that I'm looking at. That's going to take care of it. This was not picked up by that, and this would not be picked up by any of those tools because they're looking at, is your S3 bucket open to the internet? Which is not the same as this where someone just accessed it and tried copying it out as well. Another thing why you would also find this as a flaw is DLP or data leakage is not a thing in AWS. I mean, hopefully no AWS people get pissed off, but the reality is that most cloud providers, even Microsoft, Azure, they have a DLP solution which works really well in Azure space, but if you're multi-cloud, that fails at that point in time. And most DLP solutions are designed for on-premise, not for cloud. So if you actually had someone in your AWS account copying out a lot of data out, basically imagine your entire EC2 instance volume being copied across, it would not get picked up by a native product in AWS. You need to have some kind of a solution for it. Now, the solution may vary for different people depending on what is important for you, but that doesn't exist. Which brings me back to the tale of three cloud breaches. The first one, which is the Uber and Datadog breach that happened some time ago, that was essentially because their access keys were logged onto were escaped on the internet. Well, I won't say escaped, but they were just shared on the internet accidentally, and that's kind of how that happened. FTX, they had basically a crypto wallet, which with their secret manager, which is the AWS secret manager, so they got all access to all the passwords from there. Capital One, I probably would put an exception category, but it's still worthwhile calling out. Capital One had an AWS employee who kind of transferred over, so it's technically not an internal or an external person, it was just an AWS. Just, I don't know how anyone would actually deal with it. I don't think anyone's threat model covers an actual AWS employee trying to hack you, but that was an exception scenario. But essentially, the idea over there was they found that one of the EC2 instances had an IAM role, which had access to a web server, which is a web server facing the internet with the vulnerability that they exploited and got access to the IAM role, which had access to the S3 bucket that they made public. So similar scenario. Now, if I kind of bring back to what I just explained, what we did, we had 3 strikes on all of them. We had the access keys. We had S3 bucket with sensitive data as well, which was clearly not well guarded. IAM user did not have an MFA. And I mean, Capital One was all 3 of 3 for us at that point in time. But essentially, there are examples of it, but I think they're spoken about in the context of there was an S3 bucket left open on the internet, so the entire focus just goes on an S3 bucket open on the internet, not to the fact that, by the way, there's a IAM role in your organization which is over-permissive. I wanted to show this as well. This is the Attack MITRE framework. They do now have a cloud version which is there. They don't have a specific version for AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. They, however, have a general one. And if you kind of look at the first 3, if I can zoom into that one, essentially, this is your most obvious one, which is the S3 bucket, EBS volume, databases. Anything which is of storage or with access being allowed on the internet is usually the way people find those data. Or you have a valid account, which in my case was a Terraform user account that they found. Trusted relationship, this is not spoken about enough. Essentially, if you are using AWS, AWS doesn't have all the services for what you need for your, engineering needs. You might have, a Datadog or something or the other for whatever you're doing. Similar to how we were using Terraform, you would have made IAM users, or you would have made IAM roles specifically for those providers. Those are not technically monitored the same way because they have an external ID. That being what they do is essentially quote unquote collect information. They have an IAM role as well, which it can be permissive, which was permissive in my case, but in most cases they usually ask for read-only access to collect information from virtual machine. But you may be working with a third party that is integrated into your AWS account, but require a lot more than that. So worthwhile calling out that those 3 are still the more common ones. This hasn't really changed much. And just trying to give the example. I think so. The next few are just giving an example of the fact that pretty much what I called out. We had the third party credential in the cloud account, sensitive information for IAC as well. All right, this is kind of towards the tail end of it as well, but essentially what I want to talk about is the mitigation for low-hanging fruits. Now, technically, one would say that if we had a pull request, this could have been picked up earlier instead of just one person just being allowed to, because they're senior, just letting them push through. Now, I'm not saying that you should not let someone push through based on experience. There is a level of trust required for the GitHub repositories that you're maintaining, or GitLab repositories you're maintaining, or Bitbucket, or whatever else you use. But the idea is that we took away the fact that even if it's a senior person, we still improved our GitHub workflow. Now we have a pull request workflow. There's an approval process. Even if it's a more senior person, there's still someone else who has to validate before they actually push anything into a ISC library. We had the right kind of controls in the code context, in the application, didn't have for IAC or any other repository for IAC, because technically it's a separate team. We're not technically developers, we're technically builders, so the same rules didn't apply, but I would technically say they definitely do apply to us as well. The other thing that we ended up doing was secret rotation. One thing that we did, and maybe lesson we learned, was the fact that if you create keys, it should be fairly easy for you to rotate the keys as well. We had those keys used as static keys in other places as well. So the moment you kill one key, suddenly everything else stops working, and you're like, oh, it's probably being used for somewhere else as well. So having a process, I think in cybersecurity, we are told about data lifecycle, secret lifecycle, key lifecycle. That's why they talk about it. Essentially, as part of our disaster recovery planning, now we also have this method where are we able to rotate a key without affecting everything else. So we started using Secret Manager, even though it had a hack before, but we started using Secret Manager for keeping secrets instead of static files. That was one of the takeaway for us from that as well. That's essentially for the credentials. In terms of users, the mismanagement of users, I would say this is a work in progress, especially if you have I guess we don't have a large team. We are still 20 of us. It's not really a huge team, but people who have a larger team having a periodic user review, however you do it. These days, you can have solutions that can look at your IAM roles and tell you beforehand if they are permissive or not. But it definitely helps you at least get to a point where you feel comfortable that none of the IAM users that are there in your AWS accounts are new and not known to you. But also, if you can get away from using IAM users, this is the best thing possible. But something that I learned as well, which is probably worthwhile sharing, is that AWS would recommend that you should have IAM role, external ID on the IAM role as the best practice. But one thing they don't mention is the fact that for that to happen, the person on the other end should be on AWS as well. It's kind of like their way of, I guess, growing the ecosystem, if you want to say that. Which is why Terraforms of the world and other people, they primarily use IAM user. Now, obviously, if you're a big enough organization, you can ask them to go down that path and they create an AWS account. But essentially, that's one of the reasons why you would find a lot of providers, they just ask you for an IAM user. They don't ask you for a role, because that's what Amazon says, because that helps the Amazon ecosystem as well. So just to let you know, it's a bit of a gray area as to why some organizations choose to go IAM user versus IAM role, when it's pretty well known that the best practice is to go for IAM role. Now, in terms of benchmarking, CIS benchmark is an obvious one, but it kind of fails itself after the first account. So I won't recommend it. I just kept it there because I think it's definitely worthwhile checking into if you have not looked into yet. But there's one from CSA. They do a multi-cloud one. Most cloud providers, mostly everyone, including us, we're all multi-cloud. We have Azure, GCP as well. And the idea behind has always been the fact that, okay, how do we do security in a unified way across the board, across all three cloud providers? Initial starting point was the benchmark for Azure and GCP because we're primarily AWS shop. Adding Azure, GCP meant that we just didn't have a starting point. So we started going with CIS benchmark to start off with, and that kind of started building from there. So if anyone else is in a similar state, they can do the same as well. Last one is probably the hardest one. As easy as I have it as a one-line item of asset inventory, it is a problem that has not been solved since the time I've joined IT. And we still don't know what assets we have everywhere in all our on-premise AWS accounts and Azure as well. But that is still definitely one of the ways to know if there are extra resources that are being created. So the conclusion is obviously knowing users and secrets is always a good idea. User review definitely helps. Like a periodic user review definitely helps. Security controls are good to have, but you need to have an additional control for business logic flaws. That's kind of what we were affected by. That nothing to do with S3 bucket open to the internet, nothing to do with EBS volume open to the internet. It just was a simple case of the business logic that was used to protect that system or application was not right. Education for employees who are going to be creating those resources is paramount as well. In terms of monitoring threat, we started adding scenarios for, I think we've been grateful for every time we've given this talk, we've basically had people talk about similar scenarios that they experience. So we've been able to kind of add more threat detection on our end as well. That kind of definitely helps to kind of keep building on that library. As many of you who may be from a threat detection background, it's never you have all the answers in one go. We are always evolving. There's always new changes coming in. I think, in fact, now as of AWS reInvent, for people who've been following it, they had so many Bedrock announcements, Playroom, or whatever it's called, Playrock. Essentially now there's a lot of AI being used as well, so that's a whole another gamut of what are kind of controls you can actually apply. Turns out AWS themselves don't really have anything apart from saying IAM role is a good way. You should make sure your applications have the right IAM permissions. Like, thank you, but no thank you. Anyways, that's kind of like what the conclusion of that was, but that's kind of what the talk was. I have got time for questions if anyone has questions, but thank you for your time. Thank you. There's a gentleman with the mic if anyone has a questions. Otherwise, I'll be here as well. Cool. No one wants to share their breaches anymore? Cool. I think if there's no question, there's a question over here in the front. Thanks.
Hey, you said about using an I am role instead of an I am user. I didn't think...
Oh, so I am role instead of an I am user?
Yeah.
No. So I think the general practice is to use temporary credentials, basically what they say, and the best approach to do that would be using I am roles, because that allows you to create temporary access credentials. That's what the general practice recommendation is, but your third party would just say, oh, we don't use that. That's why we had to use I am users.
But you need a user with which to be able to assume that I am role. You can't just log in using I am role. You have to...
If you have an external ID, you can. So if you have I am user can have an external ID or an ID attached to it, which allows you to request STS credentials.
But that still is linked to an I am user on the back end. As in, there's still an I am user that you can use then to request the credentials, and then you can assume that I am role.
As in, sorry, you still have an I am user somewhere who's ultimately, or most scenarios, people would say single sign-on is a better way. Use single sign-on instead of using I am user, complete ditch that. You can still use STS if you have single sign-on. If you can, because nowadays Identity Center from Amazon is free as well. I can definitely, and they have a local, like we met a tech startup here, which is fully, like day one onwards, they were in cloud, no Active Directory, don't even know what waterfall methodology is like, but they ended up using Identity Center for their user directory, for their single sign-on, and for connecting with IAM roles across the board. So that is the recommended way if you just want to be fully native to AWS. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, one more here.
For this particular setup, would something like Prisma or Scout Suite detected that?
No, because it's business logic. It's not. So what they would detect is the fact that, hey, by the way, I can see this 3-step, 4-step process to the fact that it's open to the internet, but they would expect us to put this as a custom rule into the tool. Like even if Wiz, Prisma Cloud, whatever else you want to take, at least I think we're using Wiz. One of the CSPM. We don't use them anymore because we don't have that much in the CSPM or need for a CSPM, but whatever CSPM we had is not detected. We had to put that as a custom rule in it. Okay. And they did call it out that if it's a business specific rule, then you should add it yourself, is what the wording we got from them. So thank you for the question. Any other questions before? Sweet. Going once, going twice. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this. Thank you.